Hey, I'm going to go ahead and pick up where we left off. So I have my moon reference in here. I went ahead and changed my layer name to moon ref, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer here that is just a drawing, and we will make that a vector drawing. I'll just call that moon, add and close. And so you'll notice that the moon dims. If you don't want that to happen, like the moon reference dims when I'm on the new moon layer. If you don't want that to happen, you can always choose this little light bulb right here and turn it off. That's the light table, and so that'll make it shine through. I'm always worried when I do that I'm going to be drawing on the wrong layer, and so one of the things you can do is lock that moon ref layer. That way you know that you're drawing on the correct layer. So using my pencil, we've kind of already talked about this, but I can start drawing a circle, and I can adjust my pencil settings here. Let's try pencil 2. I like how pencil 2 looks. And of course, I can try to draw a perfect circle if I'm trying to go for something a little more cartoony. Maybe I want to do something a little more abstract. And so I want to talk just a little bit about how to work with lines. Let's say I get something close. Let me get it here. I'm just undoing every time I try it. And I know I'm intentionally not trying to do a perfect circle. I'm trying to do something a little warped, right? So let's say I get something close, and I just want to go ahead and manipulate this and make it a closed path here, right? I can move my entire object with this black arrow, or this black tool, and say black selection tool. And so if I select it, I sort of grab it, move it around. If I move over here to the center, I'm actually grabbing the pivot point. So I want to move it until I'm grabbing the object. I'm also able to warp the drawing or do whatever I need to with this as well. You can even skew it. Right? If I go down to this this contour editor tool, right? Then I'm moving the individual vertices that make this up, right? So I could choose to just cross those over a little bit, right? And then I could go back to my selection tool and hold it down and go to cutter, and then I can just trim off these extra pieces. I can either drag to trim them off, or I can select them and just hit delete. And what I have now is this circle that is this enclosed point here. It doesn't line up perfectly. So one of the things I can do is click here on this and hold down Alt and drag out, and that's going to allow me to just sort of build this like complete tangent. Again, if I zoom in, it's still not perfect, but it's close enough, right? And so I can get like a kind of a neat little like cartoony moon, right? I also want to show you that that's not the only way we can do that. Right. With any stroke that I make, I can warp it pretty easily, right? So, we have our brush tool, which is going to create more of a fill shape, right? We have our pencil tool, which is going to create the stroke. We have the stamp. Let's just sort of skip over that now. The eraser, if we wanted to make text, this is going to make stroke text with it, and we can add a fill to that. But then we have these shape tools here, this selection here. So let's just go to ellipse. And this is just going to allow us to make like a perfect circle or a perfect ellipse. And if I hold down Shift, I can make a perfect circle. It's very even in the width of the line, right? So let's say this is where I start, and I do want it to be perfect. Then I'm fine. I'm done, right? But if I want a little bit more character to it, obviously I can go in here and start adjusting these individually and get like a little bit more of a wobble to it. But there's also sometimes you just want to be a little bit more gestural about that. So again, with this contour editor, instead of selecting it and going and selecting a point, I'm just going to kind of click off to the side. I'm just going to mouse over to where I have this, and then just click and push, and I can start warping it, and it will auto recalculate all of these vertices to get the shape that I want, right? And so if I want my moon to be just a little bit more warped, I can get something like this, right? I do want to this question just kind of came up earlier, recognizing that I can select this object, but it's a very perfect stroke, right? That's more perfect than most of our pens or anything would be able to make. So I can individually go through here and change the center line of the pencil editor I can go in here and select this, and you'll see that I have these two dots here, right? So this is not editing the tangents and the vertices that are making up that shape. This is editing the thickness of that shape, right? So if I grab this, I can make it thicker on that side and thinner on the other side of the stroke. Or if I hold down, I believe it is Shift, I can sort of do it, together. But we just have these 2 points that are showing up here. Sometimes you'll have more in other strokes. Let's say if I wanted it to be thicker at the bottom and thinner at the top, I could hold down Control and add an additional line here, and then hold Shift, make it a little thicker at the top or bottom, and then go up here and hold down Control, add another one, and make that a little thinner at the top. And so now we get the ability to sort of control our line thickness, right? Now this is just if you want a line. If you don't want a line, we can actually turn that line completely off. And one of the ways we can do that, really before we do all of that adjusting on the line thickness, is to just adjust the thickness here, right? So I could go back and just turn this down to 0. Now that we've done this pencil editor, that becomes kind of disabled. So if I just click on it again, we're still sort of using that same line thickness, and we can adjust different things to it. So I'm going to go back to where I was. Feeling pretty good about that. We'll go ahead and keep this right now for my moon shape. Right. So I do think it's worth mentioning that even with the vector lines, there are textures we could add to this, right? So I could grab this and change this to charcoal, and you'll see that I'm getting kind of this rougher charcoal shape. It's important to recognize that what I actually have though here is still just that pencil or that stroke that is happening down the center. That's a vector line with no thickness at all, right? What we're getting in this image is a rendering of a texture within a certain range of the center line there, right? And so this will become pixelated if you're close enough to it, or certain ones will. And so it's nice, and you can use it for different things, but it's not making this complex shape. It is making a kind of an opaque layer on top of it that is rendering in that way. And why that's significant is if we decide we wanted to go here to the paint bucket, and so I have to paint bucket go. It is under here, paint bucket. So let's say I wanted to fill this now with my mid-gray, and I painted that. Right? It goes all the way up to the edge of the line, right, of the center line. So you'll see that fill goes up to here. Right? If I were to select this stroke and go back to my pencil tool and set this to 0. Oh, can I just turn this off? I thought I could. Oh, I don't have the stroke selected. I'm sorry, I have the fill selected, I think. Let me go back to before I did that fill. Get my pencil here. Select that. Go back to my pencil and right, I'm doing it wrong. It's down here. This, right? If I set that to none, or if I reduce this down to nothing, right? You're going to see that the fill that I'm actually getting there is going all the way up to the edge of the line, right? Not going past it on the other side or anything like that. So, so that's going to kind of happen underneath that stroke that we just took away. And so sometimes you want something different, right? Sometimes you want the fill to go all the way up to the center line, or you want some overlap for whatever reason. And so let's go ahead and just use this as I like it like this. I'm going to leave mine like this. So again, this stroke uh, is an imaginary line that we are rendering with a color around it, right? And this fill, I can just use this paint bucket here, but sometimes there's a reason to not do that. And so I really like to keep my line work and my color work separate. And the reason for that is because this fill is it's just as if I took this brush and made a blob in the center of it. That blob just happens to be perfectly fitting inside of this circle. So let's say I then wanted to go in here and, you know, paint some shadows on this or whatever. I can paint over my line, right? And I don't like that. I want to kind of keep these separate so I can have more precise control over it. Sorry, let me sorry about this. I'm getting some notifications for another class that's coming up. Yeah. So we have this, and this is on our line layer. And you'll look over here on the side. I want to show you a couple of things in the interface here, and this will start to make sense soon. So right now we are looking through the camera. We're saying this is what the camera will see, right? Once we render it, and you'll actually see where the camera sort of exists later here. And as we mentioned before, if I click this button here, I've just drawn a black line on no background, so it's black on black, right? I'm not able to see the line. If I click this little flower, this is showing you what the render view will look like. This is sort of a temporary view. And sometimes that's what you want, but usually we want to have a little bit more control of the background. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer here. That's a color card. And for my color card, the interesting thing about this color card is it doesn't really always matter where it's at. The color card is always in the back. And so I double click this little thing here, and I can make my, oh, I don't want to do that. I can make my colors like sort of this dark blue, maybe. And so I'm gonna start here, right? And then I can go ahead and lock that if I want to. And go to my moon. And so we can kind of see it there a little bit better now. And if we're looking at it through the render view, we'll be able to see where that's at, right? And at any point that this is kind of annoying to you, I can turn, you know, you can turn that on or off too. But that is going to allow us to give this on a blue background, right? So again, what we're seeing here is what is going to come out of the camera in our final render. But this drawing exists in other places than just how it is exposed here. And so when we have this camera tab selected here, we're seeing what's coming out of the camera. But I have the moon drawing frame 1 selected. And so if I go to drawing here, this is the actual drawing, right? And there's no end to this, right? It is this giant infinite canvas. And if I continue to draw like anything on this, it can extend to be this enormous drawing, or it could just be a little dot, right? Everything is its own vector drawing. So that's what we're seeing now is the drawing. And so we can switch back and forth between what it's going to look like in the camera and what the actual drawing looks like. And with that, this little thing on the side will become handy. So we have this eyeball, and this eyeball, when it is on, it will show all layers. Right now, we are just looking at the line layer. And you'll see that if I click on this color layer, there's nothing there. So this is like every drawing has 2 layers. And we call them line and color because that's what they're most commonly used for. But you can use them from other things. Like some of them can be like your underdrawing or whatever you want to use. But right now, I like using them as line and color. So if I switch to color, there's nothing there. Line is here. And what this will allow me to do is separate that fill from the line work. And the way I do that is just going to select my object here, and I click this button. I honestly don't even think you have to select the object to do this. I think we can just hit this button. And this button will move, what does it call itself? Create color art from line art, right? So it takes the stroke that is in our line art and it pushes it down to the color art, right? And so the color art now has the same exact stroke that was on the line art, there's just no line on it. And so now I can do my fill directly on this color layer. Right? And so I'll use my mid-gray to fill that in. And you'll see that there's my line, there's my color, but if I click this eyeball, this is what they look like together, right? And what this will allow me to do is just work on, if I turn off that eyeball, it'll allow me to just work on the color without worrying about messing up the line. So, going back to my, and I can do this in my camera mode too. I can still switch back and forth. So I can just be working on the color line here, but if I go to my color layer here, and now if I were to, turn off this background, now if I were to paint this like shadow through the middle of here, it doesn't show up on my line, right? It doesn't show up on top of that line. It goes underneath the line. Okay, so you can kind of see why that's beneficial. What I'm actually going to do though is I'm going to use this brush to paint shadows onto my color layer, right? But I'm going to use, instead of this paintbrush, I'm going to use this stencil brush. And on the stencil brush, there's this option here that says repaint brush mode. And so that means if there's already a fill here, it will only, repaint brush mode. It will only paint on that. So I can do all this all I want. It's only going to paint the parts that's already been painted, right? And this will allow me to then go in here and get maybe a little bit more of a textured brush or pastel. What does this look like? And maybe make it, I don't think that's going to work really well with this. Let's just use our solid brush but make it bigger. Like this. See how big my brush size is. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then I can use this as my example and start painting in some blotches here to give me the indication of the moon. So maybe a little bit like this. A couple of little blotches here. One here and here. One there, right? And then I can do my brights down here, this bright thing here. Let's turn this down. And push that back up just a little bit more. And again, all of this is happening on the one right there. I don't know if that didn't work right so much. I can go back to my shadow color and get a little bit more splotchiness in here. Right. So maybe a little bit of something like that. And then when I go back to my line work, you can see now this is kind of what I'm getting for my moon, right? Now, I just use these sample colors here. This may be a little too harsh for me, right? The other thing is this may be a little too, I gotta go back to my color layer to select it. Some of these shapes may be a little too hard or noisy, right? And I wanna clean that up just a little bit. So, so one of the ways I can do that is to give me 1 second. I have to check something. 310. So one of the ways I can do that is to go to my drawing, and there's all of these like optimize. I can smooth this a little bit, and it sort of smooths it. Wait, why did that not? That's interesting. Oh, that's funny. The reason it did that is because now the shape underneath it, the shape of the mid-gray is now hollow, right? I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now that blue's going to come through there. Like it cut it out of it. So I didn't really do it on top of it. It did it instead of it, right? Yeah, so like right now I'm, we can smooth it, we can do stuff like that. If I did smooth it, let's go back and do that again. If I did this, drawing, optimize, smooth, right? And I'm like, whoops, that didn't work. I can actually always delete this fill and even this fill if I wanted to. and then I could go back in there with this mid gray and just refill that shape. Oh, I gotta just gotta push my line work back down there again, so we got that shape. I could refill that shape with this, right? And so I can get stuff like this if I'd like. I'll be honest, I'm going to go and probably go back to where it was still a little noisy. I'm okay with some of that. Because I think what I really want to do instead of fix that, instead of like clean that up, is I think I just want to balance these colors a little bit, right? I think my mid-gray is a little too light, and I think my dark is just a little too dark. And so I'm just going to kind of balance those out. I may also need to add some more speckles throughout the moon and texture it a little bit more. So I can start balancing those out just by going into my shadows here and start to play around with the color that I have, right? So I'm going to go to multiple wheel mode here because now I have these other options and I can start making that a little less contrasty if I wanted, right? And we could do something like that. And then my bright, I can make that just a little more. And so now this is starting to feel a little bit more like a normal moon. Now recognize that what I did is I changed what mid-gray is on everything in this scene. So if something else was colored with that mid-gray, I just changed the color of it too, right? So this is allowing me to do that. And again, I think for me, I would probably just go back in here and just little bits of detail, touching it up. I gotta change my brush size again, something like this. Get some of these little bitty like squiggles in here to like clean this up, bump up that size just a little bit more again, and just get like some of this little textural stuff in here, including some more stuff out through here, because I think that's really what's happening is it's feeling a little too clean in areas and like not clean enough in others. And like with my brights here, I can add some brights here, maybe even down here around the edge, maybe a little bit of something up here, something in here. And keep in mind, this is all, like I can still go back to my mid-gray and kind of retexture some of this. So we can do this however we need to. I'm kind of liking where we're getting to right here, so I'm probably gonna stop there. So now I have my moon, and at this point I can turn off my moon reference, put this on this background color, and just sort of see how that feels, right? So, maybe not perfect yet, don't sweat it too much. The other thing is, I don't know that I want a black outline around my moon now. Now that I'm seeing it on this, like, ooh, that's cool and all, but I think what I would really rather do is see this as maybe my shadow color or something like that, right? Or if I really wanted to do this, I could do this as my bright and get like a glow on it. So we can start playing around with that and see which of those feels better. My shadow color, or I could just make another color. So yeah, I'm kind of digging that. So for right now, that's where I'm going to stay. Let's talk about a cloud. Right? So again, we're in my camera. Yeah, if I set this on render mode, we can kind of see where this ends up in the camera. It's a little harder to see with my color card off in here. You can kind of see it in here too. So I think what I'm going to try is in the next video at least, I'm going to do a frame-by-frame animation with a cloud sort of morphing through a cycle and back into itself again. And I'm going to show you just sort of some ways to do that. But the first thing I do want to show you this is like this moon, the moon doesn't change, right? The moon is always there. If it does change, we're in some trouble. So I want this moon drawing to stay the same forever, right? But right now, if I extended my timeline out here, like to say 170, we're going to keep going. It's going to be much longer than that. As soon as I go to frame 2, the moon disappears, right? So I do want to extend this drawing of the moon way out through here. But let's do for right now to 170. And the way I do that is F5. So the F5 key will extend it all the way out to that end. And that means that one drawing is being held for that entire length of time. All right. So I'm going to stop the recording right now, and we'll pick up some more on the next recording.